To all members of the Environment and Regeneration Committee, you're hereby summoned to attend the special meeting of the Environment and Regeneration Committee, which will be a hybrid socially distanced meeting to be conducted remotely via WebEx and also physically in the Chamber, Guildhall, on the 27th of September at 4 p.m. Chair, I'll just take the attendance if you're happy. Thank you. Alderman Morris Devaney.
Here, Karen.
Alderman Devaney, are you here?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Alderman Hussey.
Online, Karen.
Thank you. Alderman Kerrigan is in the chamber. Alderman Ramsey.
Trying to get them. He mustn't be there yet.
Okay, that's fine. Councillor John Boyle.
Karen John's just running a few minutes late. He just texted me there.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Angela Dobbins. Councillor Dobbins, are you here? I haven't seen her. No, okay. Councillor Stephen Edwards.
Yep, here, Karen.
Yep. Councillor Rachel Ferguson is in the chamber. Councillor Christopher Jackson.
And Shaw, Karen.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Dan Kelly.
Shaw, Karen.
Thank you. Councillor Emma McGinley, I think I've seen earlier.
Shaw,
Yeah.
Karen.
Thank you. Councillor Roy McHugh. Are you here, Councillor McHugh? I'll just keep an eye on that. Councillor Maeve O'Neill. We got Councillor O'Neill and Councillor Martin Riley.
Here, Karen.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Chair, the webcast announcement, do you want to do that, Chair?
I can do that. Thank you very much. Karen.
Chair, just before you move on, I just want to clarify, are you able to hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
That's
Karen.
okay, that's lovely.
Broadcast members, I would like to remind everyone present at this meeting in the Guildhall or in attendance remotely that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. This broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with our protocol. Due to your attendance at this meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and to the use and storage of those images for broadcasting or training purposes and for the purpose of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. Members and approved speakers are reminded to only have their mics and cameras on while speaking at the meeting and to use the chat facility to highlight a request to speak. A copy of the Council Privacy Notice may be found on the Council website, www.derrystheban.com. Members, we will see, have we any declarations of interest on point 4? Or if we wish to raise it during the meeting, but if we have no declarations, no one's coming in with any declarations of interest. Members, we will move to number 5, Chairperson's Business. There are 2 quick items which I have been asked to look into, and the first one is Alderman Devaney. Morris.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
We hear you, Morris.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me in. And look, the issue that I want to bring to the attention is, look, the issue and around the match that Derry City played versus Shamrock Rovers in the quarter final of the Cup at the Ryan McBride Brandywell Stadium. And Chair, it's in round the insensitive and callous chants and mocking of the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, and they did sing Lizzie's in the Box. And, you know, when we look at this facility, the Brandywell, it is a shared facility between Derry City and Institute, and, you know, all should feel welcome. And, you know, with the 2 clubs working there with Institute and Derry City, this should be a model of good practice. You know, we've always said over the years that sport is the one thing that brings everyone together and, you know, helps build that friendship and good relations. And, you know, with this type of chanting ongoing, you know, at that match, it makes it very, very difficult from people from the PUL community to attend the Brandywell. And I have spoken to a number of people who attended the game from both communities, and they said they were disgusted and sickened what they heard in the Brandywell. And some of them did say, look, we will never be back in the Brandywell again because of those chants. And you know, when we look at their opposition that night, Shamrock Rovers, they had an incident of the very same model at their match, at their Europa League match or whatever it was. And look, one thing I will say that the Shamrock Rovers committee or whatever they were, Shamrock Rovers were very quick out of the blocks, and they did condemn the highly insensitive and callous chanting. And you know, they did also say that you know, it condemns any form of bigotry or discrimination and around their grounds. And I say that has to be welcomed, coming from Shamrock Rovers. While there is still hurt there about what they done, at least there was some form of method of action being taken. Now, since this match, and Chair, it happened a week past on Sunday, and I have no problem with the great one that they had against Shamrock Rovers, no problem with that there. But Derry City have been silent on the issue, and I believe, look, Chair, that I believe they have to answer to this. I believe they have been silent, and they have been contacted by a number of people regarding this incident, and have been very quiet on it as well. And it'll be my opinion, Chair, look, that I believe in what I have just said, I believe that they do have to answer to this. And I would be proposing that we write to Derry City to request what action has been taken to deal with the behaviour on that night, and call on the club to condemn this type of activity. Chair, I think this needs to be done as we move forward from this. And look, there has been hurt in the PUL community, and I have mentioned earlier on at previous meetings and around the cavalcade and around the Bogside, mocking the Queen's death and passing. And let's remind ourselves, Chair, there was a senior Republican passed away during that time within the city, in the city side here in Londonderry. And one thing I can say, that the people from the PUL community didn't rise to the challenge of mocking that person's death. They didn't go out publicly and mock it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank
Chair,
you.
Alderman Ramsey, I'll second that.
Thank you for your attendance there. Thank you, Alderman Ramsey. I think Alderman Hussey has seconded in the chat box, but thanking you for your input there, and we note your attendance. Members, I think Alderman Guy is first in the box here this week, and we do have Councillor McHugh's attendance noted also. Alderman Guy, Darren.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not a member of this committee, but thanks for giving me some time to chat about this here. I was passed a video of the chanting that took place within the Brandywell. So I contacted Steve Setterfield of the council, as well as I only had an email address for the secretary of Derry City Football Club. So through that, I did contact Philip O'Doherty to ask what actions the club would be taking against these fans. Now, I had been informed, Steve did get back to me straight away, and he informed me that he hadn't been at that match, but he had been at the match before it, and they were keeping an eye on things. However, it did get out of hand at the Shamrock Rovers game, apparently. Now, according to Steve, he thinks there were 6 people ejected, but I have reports about there was incidents of fighting outside the ground on the lead up to the match and so on from residents in the area. Other people have said to me how they attended the match and were absolutely disgusted by the actions of this section of fans. And I'm still waiting for a reply from the chairman of Derry City. So hopefully, if the council agrees to write to Derry City to ask these questions, that they can receive an answer quicker than I have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Guy. Alderman Devaney, if you're putting forward a proposal, is there a way that you can maybe put that into the chat box? I do note that Alderman Hussey has seconded here. Derek, do you wish to speak on the issue?
Chair, I'm going to put in the proposal into the box. It'll take me a wee minute.
You work away on it, Boris.
Very briefly, Chairman, it is disappointing when this sort of activity and occurs, especially at a sporting event, and indeed at a venue which is a council venue and which is shared by both parts of our community. And I think it's a fair enough proposal that we ask the club themselves to respond as to how they have taken on board the events and how they are dealing with them, and their comments would be welcome, I'm sure, by many. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Hussey. And unless anyone else wishes to speak, or do you wish to wait to see the proposal first? Members, can you see that proposal in the chat box there? As noted that we write to Derry City Football Club to request what action has been
Taken. I've left out the taken.
Has been taken, right, to deal with the behaviour and call on the club to condemn this type of activity, and that is reference to the chanting that was raised at the match on the Sunday prior to the Queen Elizabeth's funeral. That's what we're referring to, members. Members, if we're content, that has been proposed by Alderman Devaney and seconded by Alderman Hussey. Councillor Jackson, for a comment.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I suppose in relation to the proposal and the incident that happened during the Shamrock Rovers game, I, from our party's perspective, we're content they support the proposal and the spirit of the proposal, because it isn't appropriate to mock anybody's death, and particularly when it could it undoubtedly caused so much offence to many people within our community. So but that being said, no, there needs to be a protection for free speech. They control chanting within a football ground. It was unfortunate, the content of the chanting, but for council, they attempt they restrict what can be chanted at a football ground. Is getting into very dangerous territory. But that being said, it's a council facility. If it's causing offence, then council it's only right the council steps in and does whatever it can. But as a party, we do feel strongly around the protection of free speech. Chair, just in relation to that day in particular, because in the build-up to the game against Shamrock Rovers, there was another large gathering in the city for the Martin McGuinness Chieftain's Walk, which commenced left from Martin's home, but it ended at the Ryan McBride Brandywell Stadium, just prior to that the match kicking off. And from when I was there, the atmosphere, there was a buzz about the place, that there was a lot of anticipation around the match. And I suppose from particularly anybody that was involved in the Chieftain's Walk, there was there was a great deal of respect that was there. So I wasn't picking up any of the atmosphere that Alderman Devaney was picking up in relation to fights and chanting. It certainly isn't anything that I picked up. There was a it was a respectful atmosphere, but there was a lot of excitement around an anticipation around the match itself. But it's really deeply unfortunate that those chants were chanted from the ground, and it's only right that we write to Derry City and request what action that can be taken. But we have to live in the real world. For us to move forward as a society, the control chanting within a football ground probably isn't the direction of travel we should be going down. But in terms of the proposal that's in front of us, our group are content to support it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Jackson. A brief point of clarification from Alderman Devaney, and then we have Councillor Edwards and then Councillor Ferguson. Morris?
Chair, just apologise, take my name off the list. That's okay. Happy enough.
Councillor Edwards?
Chair, thank you. I'll keep it brief. I do think that mocking anyone's death is inherently wrong, and it has caused some upset to sections of our communities, and that's wrong in itself. And I think it is important that we do call it out, no matter what section of community it comes from, Chair. And in that regard, the SDLP are content to support the motion in front of us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. And similar to Councillor Edwards, I think it is disgraceful that someone has made chants to someone who's just passed away, never mind whether they're a royalist or not. And I think it is offensive to a certain part of our community here within the city and district. And I think to say that you're trying to curtail freedom of speech is not good enough, because we've seen many football leagues trying to curtail racial slurs being thrown at their footballers, and I think we need to take action here. I think as a council, I think it's only right for us to write the Derry City Football Club to see what they've done, because we were only last week speaking around flags being sold in a stall with a licence that council had given, and how that would bring us and our good relations into disrepute. So this is similar. So Alliance Party are more than happy to support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards and Councillor Ferguson. Members, it has been proposed and seconded by Alderman Devaney and Alderman Hussey, and I don't see anyone speaking against it. So, members, I'm content that we'll declare that passed. Second piece of chairperson's business, members, Councillor Edwards. Stephen?
Chair, thanks for letting me in on this issue, and I did want to bring it in now before we get into the multitude of areas and issues that will be covered by DFA today. Chair, last week there was a meeting of the A5N2 working group. I'm a representative of this council, and so is Councillor McKinney. And it was agreed at last week's meeting that at the earliest opportunity that we would, given that we are, I think, 5 councils coming together to form that working group, that we would request that each of our respective councils reaffirms its support for the A5 Western Transport Corridor Scheme. Chair, you'll be aware, I'm not going to rehearse it over too much, the importance of the A5 scheme to the region, to the northwest. The reasons for progress scheme, they've been well rehearsed in this chamber, but for me, most importantly, Chair, is the safety upgrades that the A5 scheme would provide. And I was reading today that since 2006, when the scheme was first announced, over 40 lives have been lost in the A5. And I do have confirmation from the Minister that the new scheme would substantially reduce that, Chair. As people are aware, the A5 has been blighted with delays. There's a multitude of reasons for that, legal challenges, no minister in place, and then most recently the need to reconsult over environmental impact statements, and there's also a public consultation this year. But Chair, against this backdrop, I do think it's vitally important as we proceed towards consultation that Council does reaffirm its position and its support for the A5 scheme. And I have a quick proposal here, Chair, I'm going to put into the chat box, basically that we do reaffirm that, and we write to the Minister of Infrastructure, John O'Dowd, in the north, and we write to the Southern Minister as well to progress the scheme as soon as possible. Chair, I've just put that quick proposal into the chat box. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards, and it is seconded by Councillor Riley. And for the benefit, we do have members that are on the telephone there, so for the benefit of them, that this council reaffirms its support for the A5 Western Transport Corridor scheme, recognises the importance of this road scheme in terms of saving lives, for increasing connectivity and providing a much-needed boost to the local economy, and writes to the Minister of Infrastructure, John O'Dowd, along with his counterpart in the Irish Government, Transport Minister Eamon Ryan, urging them to progress the scheme as soon as possible. Members, unless anyone wishes to speak on that, are we content to accept that proposal? If I don't hear anything to the contrary, members, I will deem that we're content enough for that. Agreed. Thank you, Alderman Hussey. Members, that is the chairperson's business, and to get to the main item for today, members, is to receive the representatives from the DFI Roads, and that is Mr. David Healy and Mr. Robert. Daniel Healy. Sorry, Daniel. And I wrote it down wrong. And Robert McCartney. Robert's no stranger to us anyway. And to present a programme for the works for 22 to 23. So I will let you two men loose to work away there.
Thank you very much, Chair. You'll not be surprised at how often I get that. Quite a lot. I'm delighted today to have the opportunity to make a presentation to Council covering the works completed in the Derry City and Strabane District Council area in 21-22, and also looking forward to the works that we plan on carrying out in the current financial year. A lot of you may not know me, but I've had the pleasure of corresponding and occasionally meeting with you over the past 5 months in my role as Divisional Roads Manager, taken over from Dave McKinley. For those of you that I haven't had the opportunity to meet so far, I hope to work constructively with you over the next few years and improve and develop the road network in this area. As you can appreciate, the delivery of services, I think, in Derry City and Strabane District Council area in 21-22 and this year have been impacted by a number of the unique circumstances, including, to list out a few, the COVID pandemic, the contractual procurement challenges that we've had with our asphalt contracts, which I'm sure you're probably aware of, and also the budgetary uncertainty around not having an assembly sitting. Our staff and contractors have managed to develop new working practices over the last year, which enabled them to meet the much needed road maintenance and improvement works and allow them to proceed. Thankfully, the easing of the COVID restrictions recently have allowed working practices to return to normal. They're not there quite yet, but we're getting there. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, the legal challenges to the award of the asphalt contracts in 2021 left Derry City and Strabane and many other council areas without a replacement contract, specifically for ourselves here in Derry and Strabane since January 2021. However, the department recognised the issue here and developed a new interim procurement strategy for resurfacing the contracts, and happily the Strabane area was successfully awarded on the 20th of June this year, and the Derry area was recently awarded on the 13th of September. You'll appreciate that due to the lack of contract until that point, there's a bit of a delay in starting the 22-23 resurfacing programmes. This is disappointing for the department and for all road users, I think, and especially given the badly needed capital investment in this area and all areas here in the West, that it was delayed. However, there was some slightly more positive procurement news over that period, and that was the issuing or awarding of the Skeg Road contract, which is a £1.3 million project, which is recently finished in June of this year. With regards to the budget, you can appreciate there's a certain amount of uncertainty, but the Department of Finance have provided the DFI with a contingency planning envelope for both resource and capital funding. And that'll help us assist us in making decisions on the allocation of resources until a full budget is established. The planning envelope provides an allocation for structural maintenance, which includes resurfacing, which obviously forms the significant proportion of that. However, with the uncertainty around the budgets and unprecedented measures across DFI, particularly in relation to energy costs and inflationary costs, which you'll be well aware of, it's important for us to continue to monitor all the activities within those constrained funding envelopes, and difficult decisions may need to be made to realign our activities with the funding levels as the year progresses. The capital funding for structural maintenance this year, generally for DFI, is around 80 million, and that's a welcome investment, and it goes some way to producing or towards the 143 million that's actually reported by the Northern Ireland Audit Office that we need to keep our roads in their current condition. Obviously, it's not enough, but then that's we've been struggling with that for quite some time now. Unfortunately, there's unlikely to be additional allocations through the year, as the absence of assembly means that we can't move budgets between departments to address those sorts of constraints that I mentioned earlier. Just more generally on the projects that we have been completing this year in the Derry City and Strabane area, obviously the big ones are our strategic route improvement projects, and it was mentioned a little earlier, the A5 Western Transport Corridor continues to progress through the statutory processes, with the Planning Appeals Commission due to reconvene later this year or early next year, although we're pushing for this year, to address the environmental statement addendum, and the receipt of the report from the Planning Appeals Commission will pave the way for the ministerial decision to be taken to take forward the next steps of the scheme. Subject to the successful completion of the necessary statutory processes and environmental assessments, construction of Phase 1A, new buildings to Strabane, could then commence, although obviously that we don't have a clear time frame for that yet. Another one of the larger schemes in the Derry City area is the A2 Buncrana Road, and this has moved on significantly over the last number of years, but we're currently reviewing the scheme to ensure that it aligns with the department's priorities for future transport before continuing to develop the scheme towards publication of the draft statutory orders. And obviously that will require a ministerial approval to proceed. The timescale for delivering the Buncrana Road is obviously dependent on a number of issues, including the need for a public inquiry, the successful completion of statutory procedures, and the availability of funding in future years, which obviously we don't have a multi-year budget, so we don't have those future budgets agreed. The other one that obviously big scheme that's affecting Derry and Strabane at the minute is the A6 Dungiven to Drumahoe construction, and the dualling of that is progressing well, with the earthworks, 22 structures, pavement construction, and most of the other ancillary works substantially complete. There's also been quite a bit of progress with regards to the installation of drainage access tracks and utility diversions. And I know many of you will be looking for when will it be open, but at this stage we're still working closely with the contractor to agree a full opening date. From a more broader, less focused point of view, obviously the structural maintenance remains one of our largest budgetary areas, and in last year we delivered 52 kilometres of resurfacing despite the lack of those asphalt contracts that I mentioned earlier. Achieved 167 kilometres of road surface dressed, with almost 6 kilometres of new footway, or not new footways, footways resurfaced. Obviously, there's also thousands of road gullies, drainage cleaning, and thousands of kilometres of grass cut, as verges cut as well. Not to mention the maintenance defect corrections that we carry out every year, with well over 7,300 priority defects corrected. There was also 31 winter service salting activities with over 500 kilometres of roads gritted or on the gritting schedule. With regards to the work that we completed last year with network development, there were approximately £389,000 worth of schemes in the Derry City and Strabane area, with a number of 2 pedestrian crossings at Greenhorn, Limavady roads, a number of changes to legislation, and the introduction of the 20 mile per hour at schools at a further 9 schools in the area. From a blue-green active travel point of view, we obviously had around, it's detailed in the report there that there's £625,000 worth of work done on 2 main schemes in the Glenshane Road A6 cycleway footway and the Maydown cycleway footway improvements. From a street lighting point of view, obviously energy costs are going up. We spent 1.8 million last year on energy costs, and that's no doubt going to increase this year. But from a capital point of view, we spent approximately £2 million, including a lot of LED retrofitting to improve energy efficiency. One of the most significant ones of that was obviously on the Craigavon Bridge there. We continue to invest in the maintenance of our structures as well, with £228,000 spent on 30 schemes, which vary from parapet replacements to joint repairs and scour repairs. Obviously, scour being one of the most particular issues affecting our thousands of structures here in Western Division. You only have to look back a number of years to the 4 structures that came down in 2017. From a network planning point of view, obviously, it's a big part of our responsibility here in Western Division. In the client side is responding to planning applications, and there was over 1,200 of those dealt with this year, where we're a consultee on, and a number of private streets. For the coming year, obviously, we've got those new asphalt contracts in place now. So from a maintenance point of view, we do have about 12.5 to 13 kilometres of roads planned for resurfacing in the coming year. The reason that's probably down on last year is the fact that we're obviously starting our schemes a lot later, and we're not able to utilise the small-scale contracts that we'd used previously. We've also got scheduled 132 kilometres of roads to be surface dressed, a similar number of footways to last year to be resurfaced, with 20 of them. We'll also continue, unfortunately, with our reduced service or limited service maintenance activities, which means there's generally a single set of road gutty cleansing with reactive cleansing within budgets. Similarly, open drains will be cleaned on inspection by road inspectors, and we'll be looking to do 2 grass cuts per year. And also the defects within the carriageway will continue to be maintained or addressed on the same limited service that we've been running since 2015. From a network development point of view, we've another 6 schemes identified, junction improvements, footways improvements, and traffic signal improvements, equating to about £270,000 worth of expenditure. There's also 7 traffic calming schemes that we're looking at, and hopefully the progression of the Rossville Street residents parking. Obviously, we intend to re-engage with the local councillors and local groups to explore the possibilities of introducing the residents parking scheme that will meet the approval of everyone. Because I know, despite coming in only 5 months ago, I know that hit a couple of hurdles when we tried to progress it previously. And also another popular set of schemes within network development is the introduction of the 20 mile per hour at schools. And I know currently we're in a process of reviewing the schemes that have been put in. So until that's done, a 3rd tranche of those 25 mile per hour at schools is currently delayed. We're also, for the coming year, blue-green active travel is back on into focus, obviously. And we're looking at spending £400,000 on 3 footway cycleway schemes and a bus lay-by on Maydown Road. Street lighting, we're continuing to roll out the capital renewal schemes, and we've got approximately 2.3 million for renewals and new LED replacements. So that's a significant outlay, and hopefully that will help reduce or ease our resource pressures there. Structures, a further £280,000 worth of work is planned, with 17 schemes on the books. But obviously, if there's any reactive schemes that come along, then we'll address them when they come up. That gives a broad overview of where we were over the last year and what we plan to deliver on the current year. But just to highlight the issues, I think, and to make the point, the department as a whole, from a budget point of view, has a £202 million pressure on its resource budget at the minute, and that's largely the result of increasing energy prices and other inflationary pressures across our work. To be clear, that is the amount over and above what we usually roll forward as a baseline budget, and what we use for our planning assumptions, and that 202 isn't funded, and that's based obviously on August prices, and it'll only get worse looking at the budgetary outlook over the winter. The other thing I would say, just to put it in context, is the NI Water is probably the single largest energy user in Northern Ireland, and their pressure on energy alone is 50 million this year. Our pressure on street lighting is around 26 million at present, and both will likely increase over the winter. And it's the reason I sort of point those things out. It's to give context that we receive a budget, and resulting plans have to be best prioritized to work within those financial constraints. And when it comes down to a choice between being able to deliver more road schemes to ensure, as against to ensuring safe, clean drinking water, or lighting safety aspects, then naturally we would be keen to we end up having to reduce our ambition with regards to roads work to service those costs, even though we would naturally like to do more. And as I mentioned earlier, because there's no executive, we don't have the ability to move money between departments. In the past, we would have had interim monitoring rounds through the year where we were able to bid for and receive additional funding. And obviously, because we can't move that money between departments at the moment, it makes it much harder to manage those budget pressures. So I just wanted to point those out, just to give you a bit of context with regards to what we're hoping to deliver this year, and the pressures that we're currently under to achieve that delivery. But I'm happy to take any questions or make any clarifications if that's okay.
Thank you very much, Daniel, and you're very welcome. This is your first session before the council, so you could have your hand could be tired writing at the tail end of this, 3 notes that you could get, but we'll just play by ear. Robert, do you wish to pass any comment now, or do you just want to wait for questions?
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. No, quite happy to deal with any questions members may have, and just to emphasise that they should be in receipt of our inquiry request sheets, and if there's any issues that they wish to raise, if they get that are not of strategic in nature, if they could not note them down on the request sheet, and we'll get a response back to them as soon as we can.
Thank you very much, Robert. And I will emphasise that, members. I know this is kind of the regular wee meeting we have, and everybody gives a wee rattle for every wee road and pothole in their area. And so, as I say, I'm content enough, and again, I'm as equally as bad myself. But members, we do have the well, you've got it has been emailed out. Jill emailed that out yesterday, so it's from Jill Short. It's an inquiry/request form, DFI Roads, and you can put on your items on that. So again, there is that process, but again, I'm sure we will get our own wee parochial things as well, because that's what we're getting on the ground, members. But at the minute here, I have first to speak. Maybe we'll take 3 at a time here, if that's all right. Well, that's lining up here. Patricia is first on the list, and then Councillor McHugh, and then Alderman Hussey. So I'll start with you, Patricia.
Thank you, Chair, for bringing me in. I'm not part of this committee, so thanks for that. First of all, I would just like to say hello, Daniel. I haven't spoken or met you before, but hopefully we will in the near future. And I would just like to welcome Robert, too, who I know quite well, to the meeting. I have already forwarded on my little request form. I probably need to photocopy it a number of times. There's that many requests, but that has gone and all. So I will not be touching on any of those issues that were mentioned on the form. I just want to say that I'm really pleased that the residents' parking has come, that it's been looked at again, because when I did see the report, I could say, well, I've seen that paragraph in the last 3 or 4 reports, and it hasn't changed. And, you know, there was an awful lot of work done, carried out both by yourselves and community workers, and there was a lot of engagement done. I do feel that if more work had been carried out at the time, that those issues could have been resolved. However, we are where we are now, and I'm glad to say that it is on the table again, because that is much, much needed. We need to get it started, and so I will be attending that working day. I think it's penciled in for a few weeks' time. The other big, I suppose, strategic thing that would be in my neck of the woods would be a safe crossing in Foyle Road, Lonemore, Letterkenny Road junction. There is quite a lot of building going on and has been passed by planning at that right along that area. And to get across a very, very busy road, there is no safe crossings. Now, I do know that Declan McBride was carrying out a study on that, so I would be very happy if I could get maybe a report on that, if you could pass that on to Declan. But I think that's something that needs to be high up in road services plan of work in the near future, because you are crossing onto a park, community centre, a stadium. There's quite a lot of builds going on there, new builds, and I was kind of surprised to see within the planning system that there was no mention of new road infrastructure, other than maybe right and left hand turns, etc. We need safe crossing, and so I would be looking forward to seeing something of that nature coming. Also, I'm just going to touch on it. There's a terrible issue with flooding along that whole stretch of road, and I know these are only one department, but we need to look at this in the round and come up with a plan in order to alleviate the flooding that happens not just once a year for the residents of that road, but it can happen maybe 3, 4, 5 times a year, and indeed homes have been flooded in that area as well. Just want to finish off now, Chair, if you will allow me, and it's on road markings, but particularly on one spot. It's road markings. I know they're bad all over, but why I'm mentioning this one is that I did have constituents coming to me just yesterday, and that they are the third constituent who I know of who've had a parking ticket on the outside of the estate agents in Shipty Street. The road markings there, I have photos, and they're washed off. You would not know what that parking is. And as one car pulls in, the other car pulls in. One car pulls out, sorry, another car pulls in. So they're inevitably going to get a ticket too as well. I would be keen to know how many tickets was gained out of that spot. I know the wardens aren't on commission or anything, but I do think, you know, if it is a loading bay, but you wouldn't know it's a loading bay. And so there's a lot of people being caught out for parking tickets in that space. So I would appreciate it if that was looked at as soon as possible. So that's me. So looking forward to working with you, Daniel, in the future. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Patricia. And if Daniel, if you and Robert are content, we'll take 2 more and then we'll let you answer for the 3, if that's okay. So next is Councillor McHugh. Rory.
Good Chair, thank you, and I'd also like to welcome both David and Robert, and I wish you all the best, David, in your new role. Look forward to working with you and your officers. I'd also like to just pass on my appreciation to DFI and their staff for the cooperation with me and any issue I've raised with them. It's very much appreciated, so it is. I'll be very brief, Chair. As you've stated there, we have the form to fill in, and I will forward that to DFI. But I just want to obviously welcome some of the capital projects that have been completed in my electoral area through the previous year, and indeed look forward to those that have been listed in this report, hopefully been undertaken this year and completed this year. In particular, reference to Drumnabay Road, the traffic camming on that, something that has been campaigned on for a long time by myself and indeed my party, and also the planned works for Kilclean Road. Just a query on that, David, maybe you'd be best placed to answer it, but is that section of the Kilclean Road the bit that lies within the town boundaries of Castlederg? Essentially that's all I have to raise. Instead of forward on any other queries via the sheet, but thanks again.
Thank you very much, Councillor McHugh. Yeah, on home turf on the Kilclean Road. Alderman Hussey, Derek.
Thank you, Chair, and can I welcome the officials, particularly yourself, Daniel. You were scoring well there as David. I hope you can score as well as we go through. Chair, like Councillor McHugh and others, I thank the officials for the work and the cooperation that we've had throughout the past year, and indeed, in my own case, many years. Looking through the report, there's a couple of issues on it. In fact, quite a few. You may have to stop me at some stage, Chair. On page 3, the budget, similar to last year at 80 million. Given rising costs, and I think you've already alluded to this, Daniel, I think it's fair to say that means less works can be undertaken, and it's a realization that we have to face up to. And indeed, you know, where does the other 63 million that's been identified as being required come from? With regard to the delay in the asphalt contracts, they were delayed for the guts of a year and a half. Was the relevant funding that had been allocated for that held over and retained over and above subsequent funding, or did it go back into department or executive finances? On page 4, limited service policy is referred to it with regard to defect repair and gully emptying. There is an explanation on page 4 with regard to limited services defect repair, but there's no indication of what limited service means with regard to gully emptying and I presume ponding sites, etc. And you will be aware, and my colleagues will be aware, that gully emptying in our area is and can become many times a major issue. So what exactly does limited service mean? On page 5, the figures given for length of carriageways and bridges, etc., that's for the division. I'm presuming, I think that's what it says, for the Western Division. Are the same figures available for our own council area, so that in fact we can compare, the length of carriageway done vis-a-vis our own area? And it will become obvious later on as to why I'm asking that. Page 8, and I'm sure others are in the same vein as myself on this, indicative timetable with regard to the A5 Western Transport Corridor. Within the report, it says that road pavements are normally designed for an operational life of 20 years. Now, that to me would indicate to keep roads in good state, you're talking 5% on a rolling basis should be being repaired. I think my maths is correct on that. If I look at page 14, resurfacing that had been carried out was 52 kilometres at a cost of 5.7 million. That represents 0.5% of the 9,712 kilometres that are indicated. That's extremely worrying. And it's even more worrying when we see that in the current year, we're talking about 12.8 kilometres. What is that? Is it even 8 miles, 9 miles, something like that there? That's extremely worrying with regard to the maintenance. And in fact, is it a false economy? Because further down the line, as roads disintegrate, the costs rise. So it's worrying. And similarly, with regard to surface dressing, carried out up to this year, 167 kilometres. Now we're told it'll be 132 in the incoming year. Worrying statistics. On page 20, with regard to road gullies, you'll excuse me if my iPad is going out here. I just want to get back onto this particular page. With regard to road gullies, we're told how many were actually cleaned. Sorry about this. Yep. 59,394 road gullies. Those were cleaned. Out of how many? How many road gullies are there in our particular council area? Or indeed, is that a figure for the Western Division? Or is it for Derry City and Strabane District Council area? And how many of those road gullies were maybe cleaned more than once? And are there gullies that have not been attended to? Because that would be the perspective, the perception that a lot of people have, that there are gullies not being cleaned. And when we talk about cleaning gullies, does that include perhaps where a gully is cleaned out, but the actual pipe leading away from the gully is blocked? So, the gully's cleaned out, yes, a nice clean gully, but the next flow of water, it fills up because the water can't get out of the actual gully. And is that taken on board? With regard to gridding on page 22, gridding 31 occasions in 21, 22. The previous year, there were 77 salting actions. But the amount of salt, the number of occasions vis-a-vis it's a 50% reduction from 3177 salting actions. But the decrease in the use of salt was only 20%. Is there any explanation? Was there a thinner coat of salt being used or whatever during that period? As with Councillor McHugh, I sincerely welcome the Killeen Road proposals. I think that road was damaged during additional traffic because of diversion and indeed heat issues on Killeen Road, and it's good to see that those are being addressed. With regard on page 32, with regard to the 20 mile per hour, this is one that has vexed me quite a lot, as I'm sure, Robert, you may recall. There are 3 schools along the road from Victoria Bridge right through to Kiln, heading towards Enniskillen. And for the love of me, I cannot understand why the criteria has not allowed those 3 schools to go onto the 20 mile per hour scheme. I hear, Daniel, what you're saying, that there will be a delay in the 3rd tranche. But is there any indication of schools that will be brought in our area in particular, within that third tranche. On page 33, again, Robert, you'll be familiar with me on this one, the Drumlega Road North realignment. This goes back years and years. Are we finally getting to the stage where that's actually going to happen? I notice acquisition of land is ongoing. I'm not sure when the support, but are we at the point where the land has been achieved, where the design is finalised, and where we're ready to say, right, boys, we'll be heading in there and doing that work shortly. As with Councillor McHugh, I sincerely welcome the Drumna Bay Road traffic calming. I note in the foreword to that it's our aim to deliver at least 4 schemes from that particular list, but also a number of those schemes have been carried forward from the previous year's list. Which of those schemes are from the previous year, and is there a likelihood that they will be up the pecking order, shall we say, or will it be on purely on a need basis? So, how likely are we to achieve, or what number of those are we likely to achieve in the coming year? On page 44, there's mention of the street lighting schemes, and in particular, I would draw to attention the proposal from Main Street Castleberg Street Lighting Renewal Scheme. I would urge that DFI Street Lighting would liaise with our council officials, in particular, I think it's Colin Kennedy is leading on the Levelling Up Fund, because there are plans for the Diamond area, and Main Street would lead into that for improvements, environmental improvements, etc. So I would hope that there would be liaison, and that all schemes would be considered within the location and what's going on in the location. On page 45, I note a printing error, 4.2, a total length of, it's 3.9 kilometres. Yes, I was reading that wrong. So, it's welcome, those private street adoptions, etc. And finally, as with, I think it was Patricia mentioned, road marking. I want to be parochial and again mention the junction of Drumquin Road and Garvita Road. The marking there is basically gone, and there was a separation lane to allow right turning at that point. There was a realignment of that road many years ago because of fatal accident. I would hate to think that because of road marking, the same could occur, and I would urge that white lining team could attend to that as soon as possible. I don't envy your task, gentlemen, over the coming year, and thank you for what you do, but trust that somewhere along the line, the funds are going to become available to yourselves to do what you know you need to do, and what we all know needs to be done on the ground. But thanks for the work that you are doing. I suppose you're making bricks without straw at the moment, so let's hope that things will improve. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Hussey, and I could have really left you go on your own, Derek, but instead of putting the 3. But Daniel and Robert, it is over to you. The questions are raised by Councillor Logue, Councillor McHugh and Alderman Hussey.
Yeah, I'll try and take them in the order that I've jotted them down here. Forgive me if I overlooked one or missed one. Certainly the plan is to improve or re-engage with regards to the residents parking on Bogside. And as you mentioned, there is a meeting coming up, which hopefully will see that move forward again. Foyle Bridge or Foyle Road, obviously we can speak to Declan and get him to respond to the query about that one. The flooding along the road with regards to Foyle Road there, I think our first step would probably be looking at the gullies as part of our limited service gully cleaning. Obviously, if other gullies are identified during the year by members of the public or councillors, or if there's a safety issue or a flooding issue, then we generally do come out and redo those gullies. With regards to the road marking, if there's any areas of road marking that you feel may be causing either a safety issue or an issue here with unnecessary potentially penalties being issued, then I think if I would encourage anybody to use the online reporting system that does help us identify and record exactly where those areas that require additional or reapplication of road markings are, and that allows us to prioritize them. Obviously, the priority is safety, but we do have an ongoing program of refreshing lines, and that's prioritized on the basis of our roads inspectors and reports from people like yourselves or the general public. So I would encourage you to use those, and they will be addressed once until we run out of budget for the year, essentially. With regards to the traffic calming, it's planned for this year in Drumnavara, and the Kilclean Road. I'm going to probably have to get back to you, Councillor McHugh. Councillor, I think it was Councillor McHugh who raised that one. I have to get back to you with regards to the exact extent of that resurfacing. So I'll take that one away with me. You mentioned, Councillor Hussey mentioned the rising costs, and I think that affects potentially one of the subsequent questions that you mentioned with regards to the reduction in the number or in the kilometres of roads being resurfaced this year. And the list that we have provided is based on the allocation we currently have for Derry City and Strabane. And if costs continue to rise like they have done after the mini budget there, then ultimately we're going to have to probably drop one or two schemes off because it just becomes unaffordable, and that's regrettable. And we would like to to resurface all the roads that require it, and we're very conscious of the fact that the number of roads that require resurfacing and remedial measures are only getting more and more when we fail to meet that £143 million maintenance target indicated that would allow us to maintain the existing network. So I think that probably goes for that one. The asphalt contracts, I'm probably going to have to get round or back to you, Councillor Hussey, on that one, mainly because while a significant amount of money was spent, I don't have the information at my fingers at the minute on the funding that we would have had we a budget or had we an asphalt contract active at that stage. And it may be difficult to get that because the knowledge that there was no asphalt contract there at the time may have automatically indicated that we receive a lesser amount. But what I will do is I will look into how much we spent when we did have an asphalt contract and how much we spent in 21-22, and we can compare those. And if they're similar, then we obviously used other contracts to mitigate against the asphalt contract not being present there, and potentially also issued works orders towards the end of the previous contract that were carried out in the 21-22 year by our term contractor. Okay, the limited service with regards to gully emptying, at the minute it's once per year, but I can provide a link to our limited service policy, which is DEM 160, which if you actually type that into Google, it will bring you to the DFI Roads website, which indicates or which allows you to view DEM 160, which indicates what our level of maintenance intervention is, how often we're supposed to do grass cuts, and when and how we're supposed to do gully emptying, among other things, including winter service and grass cutting and things like that. So it's a useful reference document for that sort of inquiry. The 20-year design life that you mentioned, and it's a good point that you make, but that's based obviously on a design calculation, and a lot of our roads which aren't trafficked to the extent they were designed for, obviously last a lot longer than the 20 years. But I take your point, and I agree with it, that more should be spent on resurfacing and maintaining our roads in their current state, because if we don't, then the backlog begins to grow, and the cost of carrying out those works in the future obviously is more expensive. So you're right when you said we're making a rod for our own back by not addressing these at this stage. The road gully numbers, I might have to look to my colleague in our section office to answer that one accurately. Robert, my understanding that those were the road gullies, that the numbers there represent multiple road gully cleanings on includes numbers of multiple road gully cleanings, but you'll keep me right on that.
Yes, the number of road gullies, those are, as Daniel alluded to, our policy at the minute is to clean all road gullies once a year. So those are one clean per year per gully. Where we encounter problems, as Councillor Hussey alluded to, with maybe the connection from the gully to the main drain, those are noted and we follow them up with our remedial action. The remedial action depends on what the problem would be.
You mentioned, Councillor Hussey, the 20 mile per hour at schools, and the 3 schools between Victoria Bridge and Enniskillen that haven't yet received the 20 mile per hour. The review that we're carrying out will look at the criteria that we used to prioritize the schemes previously, and we'll also be liaising with the PSNI with regards to how those criteria were put together and prioritize those schemes. So at the minute, obviously, we haven't got that to that stage, and we'll be looking, obviously, the 3 schools that you mentioned there will be on that list, and they will be reprioritized, or the list will be updated once we've had a look at the criteria and the effectiveness of the current 20 mile per hour lights at schools. Street lighting schemes will absolutely liaise with our council colleagues with regards to the work that we're carrying out, and make sure that it complements the council-led scheme, the regeneration scheme there. And I think the road markings we mentioned earlier, that if there are any areas, especially areas where there's a potential safety issue, I think if that's recorded, I mean, there's multiple ways for us to address that. If we speak to the likes of Robert in the section office, or if they're recorded on our online recording system, which we're hoping to update to make it more user-friendly, or to give information or feedback to people who raise it on that, then that'll give us an opportunity to identify those sites that we might not be aware of otherwise. I hope I managed to capture most of them there.
With your permission, the prioritization of the traffic calming schemes.
Prioritization of. I will get back to you with regards to those traffic calming schemes, especially if they're the ones that you mentioned that some of them had been on previous council reports. Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Chair.
Perhaps, Chair, I could a little bit more detail to some issues that maybe Daniel wasn't aware of the detail behind some of the local schemes and local issues that were raised. Councillor Rowe referred to the flooding in the Foyle Road, Letterkenny area. which, as she rightly points out, that has been ongoing for quite a while. The reason there's flooding there is that when you get the high tides in the Foyle along with heavy rain, then the drainage system cannot empty into the Foyle. And that was an actual area that the minister visited when he came to the city back in July. And that issue is now being taken forward by our Living with Water team that has been recently set up within the department to see how that matter can be addressed or managed. Some of the other issues that were raised, Councillor Hussey raised the issue, or not raised the issue, but pointed out that there was quite a reduction in the number of winter service actions that were taken last year, but didn't correspond with a similar reduction in the amount of salt that was used. The reason for that is that we had a very mild winter, and in the past, previous years, there was quite a few actions taken in what we call marginal nights, where road surface temperatures were hovering between around about 0 + 1. And so there'd be more what we would refer to as precautionary gritting. Last winter, although it was a milder winter, when it actually temperatures did drop, they dropped quite significantly, to the effect that actions were taken, and when those actions were taken, the rate of spread required was greater than what would be required during precautionary actions. So that is why there's not a correlation between the number of actions and a direct correlation to the number of actions and the number of or the amount of salt used. If it's of any comfort to Councillor Hussey, I actually will be sitting on the Castledare Public Realm Regeneration Scheme Board. So issues over street lighting, it's standard practice for them to be addressed as part of the design process. So I just make sure that is kept to the fore. I think that's everything I think I can add any benefit to at this stage.
Is that your response, Dave? Robert, are you content enough for that, Alderman Hussey?
Absolutely. Thanks to both of them.
Thanking you, members, and thanking you, Daniel and Robert. Our next three speakers, members, it's Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Jackson, and Councillor John Boyle. So, Rachel.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Daniel and to Robert for coming today. I think Robert's always a bit hopeful that we will use the form so he doesn't get a load of queries coming through and issues that. So I'm going to try and stay strategically here for you, Robert. I appreciate your time today. I want to start by saying a huge thank you for the work that's been done in the Maydown cycle pathway, and that there's a continued plan there to take that on to phase 3, especially as when you presented to council the last time I raised the queries around the fact that there was a number of accidents with the crossing there, and I can see, because I live in the local area, that has been amended. They have a new area of green space and grass so that can't happen again. So it is great that the work that your team does and how much they work alongside councillors to try and pick up on these issues. I was going to say, as part of your new blue-green active travel, is to consider the access and from the new phase 3 from Eglinton into the main street from Broadbridge Primary School, because I know I'd contacted DFA about possibly reduction of speed in that road, because parents were coming to me saying that their children were trying to get to school on bikes, and because the pathway is so slim that they were falling off onto the main road, which is a quite fast pass one. So I know there is a hope that maybe that would become a cycle lane and have a continuation then for that active travel. The other one I wanted to touch on, the other issue here, was the private streets enforcement. Now, in the document, it does say that DFA will afford the developer an opportunity to fulfill their responsibilities. I wanted to check with you if there's a gap here in. Maybe it's possibly because DFA have a very strict budget and they don't necessarily want to be taking over this responsibility, but sometimes we're seeing developers taking 10 plus years to get to that point of adoption, and that's impacting on other roads, access roads into that. And I know these are very pragmatic in the sense of you won't resurface a road because there may be works ongoing within that development site. But it seems to be it was one or two, and I know I'm getting contacted by a number of new residents that are being frustrated by the fact that they're being left without proper access to their development because the contractor or the developer hasn't completed the roads. And I know the department tries to work alongside them, but is there a way in which the department could have more pressure on these developers to complete it in a timely fashion? Another thing I wanted to just check with yourself, Robert and Daniel, is there was a request recently about a resurfacing, and the department had come back and said that they were going to look at a thin layer of resurfacing, but this was a specialist issue, and that there was nobody within Northern Ireland or Ireland that could supply the service, so that the subcontractor may be brought in from elsewhere. I'm wondering if, for example, that this doesn't happen, the contractor isn't appointed for a thin layer, does that then have to rejig the entire budget because some certain areas wouldn't be able to have that thin layer of surfacing and would have to look at a full resurface? And then the last thing I would love to hear is just an update on the A6 to Maydown. I know it's within the documents here that, you know, there's a number of factors that need to go ahead before we see the road coming from Drumahoe right over to Maydown. But anything that you know of, scheduling wise, what the department's looking at, what's the positive side of what would we be looking at completion. So again, I really appreciate you both taking the time to come here today and present to council, and well done on all the work. And as I say, my huge thanks to everyone in the Western Division, because whenever I do have an issue, he's very frank and he's very fair, and he's do always try and help. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. And Councillor Christopher Jackson.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to Daniel and Robert for attending today. And I suppose it's been alluded to in Daniel's presentation that I suppose the climate that the department's operating in is a very challenging one, and it's right across. I suppose it's the point that we want to make out is that it's not just DFI that are being punished by one party not forming an executive. It's our entire public service that's being punished equally. But I think we just want to put on the record our appreciation for all the work that has been done by the Western Division under those difficult and challenging times, and hopefully within a very short period of time we will be in a situation where a proper government is formed, a budget is set, and departments can plan ahead properly. There was a few things, a lot of things that I wanted to raise have been picked up on, and I appreciate the opportunity to fill in those inquiry forms, because I have to say that every time I filled in the inquiry forms at these meetings, I've always had a rather swift response. But in between times, it can be hit or miss. There's times where engagement, and I appreciate that these are all extremely busy, but there can be times where you could be waiting months for a response, even not and there's times we could be going back 4 or 5 times before there's even an acknowledgement email. So I've seen the response times from DFI in particular used to be fantastic prior to COVID, and it's ever since then I've certainly experienced about a major drop off in that, and I know there's been key personnel that have moved, and you're extremely under pressure. But for our constituents, when they're asking us questions, and it could be 6 months before we even come back, they say that the department are considering it. It can be frustrating. So I just it's only right that that I use this opportunity to highlight that, and hopefully as we emerge from the pandemic, things will return to the way they used to be. The Alderman Hussey referred to the gully and the gully emptying and the limited service, and that's well, I can say that there's gullies that I've been reporting for over 4 years that haven't been emptied. And it's got this stage now where the the content of the gullies is so compacted then that it would be extremely difficult to empty them now. I've engaged with some within DFI, and some of the challenges that they're telling me is a reduction in workforce, particularly in relation to the gully emptying. There's some of the vehicles locally are ineffective, or they would break down quite regularly. So that impacts the gully emptying. And when we've seen recent flooding incidents where residents are pointing towards gullies and saying if gullies had of those could provide some level of defence against flooding, and particularly the surface water flooding. So there's particularly in areas that are prone to flooding, we would be very keen to see those prioritised in terms of any impending periods of bad weather. But I suppose just in terms of if there's additional gully cleaning over and above the one per year under the limited service, if those areas that are prone to flooding are prioritised. The final strategic question, Chair, is just in relation to the state of preparedness for winter, because there's huge challenges, and we fully appreciate the huge challenges that the department face in terms of keeping our roads open and supporting people during periods of cold weather. And we've always had the reassurance, and as we met yourselves during the autumn period, that all is being done in terms of being prepared for winter. And we have to acknowledge that it sometimes, particularly over prolonged periods of cold weather, there gaps can emerge. And just given the current budgetary pressures, and the fact that they're operating in very uncertain climate, is there any will that impact the department's preparedness for winter? And I suppose just finally on a more parochial issue, and I will include it in the forum, but I just wanted to raise this, Chair, because I've raised it at the previous 2 sessions that we've had with DFI, and it's relating to the resurfacing, because and specifically resurfacing of Lismore Avenue. Chair, I had initially made inquiries about the resurfacing of Lismore Avenue because the road is breaking up. There's no other way to describe it. I was initially told a number of years ago that the work wouldn't be carried out because there was planned utility works. After the utility works was completed, I asked again last year. Now, why it wasn't included in the next year's planned scheme, and I was told that there was a 12-month settling period. Now, that 12-month settling period had been completed, and then we were hit with the issues with asphalt contracts. So I was given assurances last year that once those asphalt contracts had been resolved, the 12-month settling period was as well over. But that resurfacing scheme doesn't seem to be on the schedule for works in the next financial year. That's extremely disappointing, because there is a level of expectation within the residents of Lismore, because the explanations, which were understandable around the utility works and the settling period, people could understand that. It was less understandable when they were told last year that it was because there was issues with asphalt contracts, and bear in mind those responses were given at this committee on open business, which many of the residents have been watching. So for now, for us to go back and say that is it budgetary pressures, or has it fallen off the list? Because there was certainly an acknowledgement from the EFI that this needed to be a priority, or this would be a priority. It needed done, and it was only those exceptional circumstances that prevented the work being carried out. And I'm just referring a line that's contained within the report in terms of that the roads generally fail by cracking and rutting. They don't usually fail suddenly, but they gradually deteriorate due to the impact of traffic, age, and weathering. Now, this road hasn't deteriorated suddenly. It's deteriorated over a long period of time, and it's deteriorated to an extent now where it's almost unusable. And that's the real frustration for the local residents. So I would be keen to know why that road, that resurfacing scheme, isn't included in the next year's planned works, and can there be any commitment in terms of when can residents expect that road to be resurfaced? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jackson. And the final speaker in this section is Councillor John Boyd. John.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Robert, for coming along again today and presenting a very comprehensive report. It always is. And Daniel, first time seeing you on this particular committee in front of us. I'm fairly sure Linfield Football Club might be surprised to hear that David Healy has now left them and gone to join the Department for Infrastructure. However, you're very welcome. I'm going to keep this pretty succinct, gentlemen, and you know, I think I probably want to start off by saying I find the DFA website is generally very user friendly, and that how the public and ourselves as public representatives can contact DFA through that website. It's very useful. And it certainly helps me in my job, and I'm sure others would concur with that. But of course, like everything in life, nothing's perfect. And I do think that there may well be an opportunity for further effective communication. So this is more an observation and not a question, really. But it refers to a matter that has been raised a couple of times already by my colleagues here, and that is the gully clearing or the gully emptying program that you are conducting? Because clearly now at this time of the year, this is the time of the year when people are probably most focused on that. It's the autumn. We do have leaves. They fall in the gullies, etc., etc. We all do appreciate that. But I do think that in a world of increased use of social media, there may well be an opportunity for DFA to better inform residents when they're actually, when and where they're carrying out gully clearing operations. And it just so happens, I happened to be walking past one of the teams who were doing the gully clearing, and I decided to have a yarn with the fellas who were doing it. And a straightforward, simple question, because obviously, if you're only clearing gullies once a year, likely as not, when a gully is looked at, it's only looked at once a year. If there's a vehicle parked on top of that gully, then clearly that gully cannot be cleared. And it may well be one of those critical ones that causes localized flooding or whatever. And I was just wondering what your view might be on how the department might better communicate the programme of gully clearing, where they will be and when they will be there. As I said, they were in my street the other day, just happened to be, I was about, and I saw them. And I would imagine there are many streets, many roads across our city and district where there's a lot of vehicles parked up, and those gullies are never looked at. And perhaps that's the answer to the question raised by Councillor Jackson. It might be that we're reporting gullies, and every time a guy comes round to clear it, there's a vehicle parked on top of it. You know, we're all very conscious. We all understand that there are particular areas of our city and district that are very, very prone to flooding and localized flooding. And so I think maybe a better form of communication, whether it be using social media or whatever, might help us over a period of time to tackle that particular issue. If that level of information, for example, could be shared even with elected representatives, I know that the elected representatives would be very, very keen then to share that with their constituents. So I think it needs somebody basically to sit down. I know that you obviously will have a program of where and when, and try and share that with people who can then share that forward. Because I'm very keen to see that constituents, as you said yourselves, are able to live with water in inverted commas, but I'm very, very keen to see that they're not living in the water. And so therefore, it's an observation and it's an idea, and perhaps there's a thought around that. Chair, that's me. I'm not going with every bump in the road and every gully in the street. I appreciate that that we can forward on our concerns in relation to other things, and of course I will be doing that as well. So again, thank you, gentlemen, for coming along here and our concerns today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle, and thanks to Councillor Ferguson and Councillor Jackson as well. So Daniel and Robert, I'll leave it in your hands.
Okay, thank you. Again, I'll go down through them, and hopefully Robert will pick up on any points that I may miss or not be aware of. The blue-green active travel from Eglinton there, it's something I'm probably going to have to come back to you on, Councillor Ferguson, because I don't have the information at my fingers here with regards to the access down to the school that you mentioned. So I'll come back to you on that. I appreciate the point that you made then with regards to the private streets enforcement, and sometimes these developments span a number of years and they're phased and they put people into houses perhaps before the road has been completely adopted. In fairness, they probably shouldn't be doing that. The solicitors should be raising that point before they move in. But I do take your point. Whether there's a mechanism for us to step outside the enforcement private streets process to carry out works prior to adoption, I'm not aware of a process that I can speak to my colleagues in network planning and development control there, private streets. but I suspect their answer will be along my sort of response there. If we haven't got it adopted, then we can't go in and carry out additional works, you know. And I take the point that also there's the way for us to encourage the contractor or the developer to go in, and that's obviously the way that we like to work, because any enforcement activity incurs legal costs, and then obviously there's a drain on resources with regards to the process that we have to go through to carry out that work as well. If there are particular developments that you're particularly concerned with, I'll be happy to take those from you and look at them on your behalf to see if there's any way that we can resolve the issues that you've mentioned. The specialist surfacing, I do recall a query coming in with regards to the specialist surfacing. Robert, you might have to just refresh my memory on this one.
Yes, I think it was actually from Councillor Ferguson, who was asking what the latest state of play was with a number of housing estates. We had planned to use the thin surfacing technique, and unfortunately the position is still the same, that our contractor has got difficulty in finding a specialist subcontractor that can carry out this work. So in all probability, it's not going to happen this year. It won't impact on the budget. It's a relatively small portion of our overall budget. But we will continue to look at alternative techniques and methods to address those two particular schemes that we have on the programme.
Okay. I think the last one was the A6 to Maydown, the timeline for completion. You're probably aware that it's our colleagues in the Strategic Roads Improvement branch in Northern Division who are managing the A6 improvement. So what I would have to do is speak to them directly to see if we can refine get a more refined timeline than what we have indicated in our in the council report there, because I know there are negotiations ongoing, and obviously there's also issues around, especially coming into this time of year with resurfacing and carrying out works. If you get poor weather, then obviously that delays things. So nailing down a solid timeline there could be difficult, but I'm more than happy to go back to our colleagues in SRI and Northern Division and ask them to provide some additional information. I'll take that one away with me. The indication from Councillor Jackson that there are occasions that there are periods of months may go by before responses or acknowledgement is issued, and if that is the case, I can only apologise on behalf of DFI Roads. We do have a fairly, or we should have a fairly robust system of mail tracking and logging calls or contacts with us that allows us to address or at least issue responses within a time frame that's acceptable. If we've failed to do that, then I can only apologise. But if there are particular issues that you're concerned about, then we're more than happy to take those on board and address them if you contact Robert or myself directly with regards to them. You did make me obviously the easy option for me to mention is the resource issues that we have. We currently carry significant staff shortages in addition to the financial and budgetary resources that we have. But I think the onus is on us to pick and address certainly queries and comments that come in if and when we can. And if there are, as I say, if there are issues where a significant period of time goes by that the lack of response, then I think that's the onus is on us to improve our timescales for response. the gully emptying, as we've obviously mentioned that a couple of times now, and there are, quite rightly, as mentioned by Councillor Boyle, that there may be issues where access to gullies are perhaps restricted or we're not able to get to them. And in those cases, my understanding is our teams, next time when they're in the area, they'll swing by and try and pick up that gully again. But obviously there's no guarantee that it's not blocked, particularly if it's in a parking area, that it won't be not missed, but it'll be overlooked again. I can say that following the storm that caused flooding in multiple areas, including Ballycolman, around here, that there was a recognition that prior to storms, sometimes we need to go around and just check those gullies. And we did get a number of representations from council operatives to check gullies in areas that had been previously flooded. And we were able to send our gully cleaning crews out and around again in those circumstances. Obviously, with budget restrictions, we'll not be able to do it for every single storm that comes through. But I think we've shown a willingness and a trying to work with council to make sure that these areas that are sometimes prone to flooding, and when that flooding is due to gullies rather than the actual stormwater systems, I think we will certainly try and get out and go around those areas if they're indicated to us or if they're highlighted to us prior to any storms. Winter preparedness. All our salt bans, I'd have to confirm this with O&M, but my understanding is that all our salt barns are currently filled in preparation for the winter, or will be in the next very short while. The resource constraints that we have, you're quite right to point out that it may affect activities that are resource based, but winter service is a safety issue, and it's also discretionary, the routes that we do service, and they service 80% of the travelling population, or that's what the gritting routes are based on. So it shouldn't, unless we get a particularly cold, long winter, I would suggest that the resource constraints that we have shouldn't affect our winter service preparedness. You also mentioned Lismore Avenue. Robert might come in and correct me here, but I would suspect that the intervening time between Lismore Avenue being indicated for resurfacing and now other areas within the Derry and Strabane area may have deteriorated at a more rapid rate and rank more highly on our prioritisation system for what areas are resurfaced at this stage, which is why it may not have appeared on our council report this year, but certainly our inspectors and our guys in the section office are now certainly aware of it, and it'll be considered as part of our future surfacing review and prioritisation. The last one there was the recognition that there may be more effective ways of communicating with the public, the work that we do, especially around gully emptying. And I would agree wholeheartedly that is an area that DFI and a lot of public facing services probably need to develop. And I know our headquarters IT department are looking at how better to communicate this and how to increase the amount of information that we can communicate to the public through our online systems rather than having to come through section offices or contact the department for relatively straightforward information, such as what gullies are to be cleaned and when. So I think the department is aware that we need to improve our information strategy, and there is movement in the background to look at addressing that and certainly reviewing the system that we currently have. I think that's most of them. Robert, do you want to jump in and clarify any of the issues there?
Yeah, if I could just take the issue over Lismore Avenue, which Councillor Jackson rose. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, this scheme has been delayed, firstly because of the activities of statutory utilities, and then the lack of a contractor. And unfortunately, as Daniel alluded to, the increase in cost of us actually having to carry out schemes is such that the list that we presented to council at the minute is very much curtailed in line of what we would have liked to have done because of the increase in costs. I'm sure everyone's well aware of the increase in cost of oil, how that impacts on oil-related products and services, and the road industry is very much impacted by the rising cost of oil, and that has meant that we have had to shorten our projected program for this year. I would still be hopeful that if there's any slippage in our program with all our schemes, that we could get Lismore done. It's still very much up there. Unfortunately, it's just been unfairly impacted by rising costs at the minute. What I say, I hope that we'll be able to do something in the not too distant future. Regarding the letting residents, etc., know when we're going to be cleaning gullies in certain areas. Yeah, I think maybe locally we could work in hand in glove with local representatives and try and come up with something that before we maybe do something on a province-wide basis. There's maybe something we could do locally. Like a lot of these things, it may sound easy in theory. When you get down to the nitty-gritty, it can be a bit more problematic. We're getting into things like you tend to go into a certain area a week commencing the 1st of October or whatever, and the vehicle breaks down, or one of the operators goes off sick, etc. But I think that would be something that I think is worth pursuing and seeing if we can come up with something we could bring to the table on a local basis. Councillor Jackson also referred to slippage in getting responses to inquiries, and again, as Daniel alluded to, apologised if things were not as they were prior to COVID. The team locally, as well as being impacted by COVID, has also been impacted significantly by a large number of retirements, and that impacted on obviously our ability to provide the service we would like to have provided, particularly over the past 7 or 8 months. We're slowly but surely getting back to complement, and I'd like to hope that, and then certainly I'll be making sure that our ability to respond to inquiries improves as we go forward. But I can only emphasise that it was due to circumstances that were very difficult and trying at the time in regards to reduction in the complement of the local team. I think that's everything. I think that I can add any benefit to any value to at this point in time.
Thank you very much for your responses there. Members, we will move on to the last three, which I have now, and that'll start with Alderman Devaney. Morris.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me in. Can I just say, first of all, thanks to Robert and Daniel for coming forward here today. Quite a number of issues raised today. Look, when we look at and around the A6, while we welcome all of that work that has been ongoing, There are certain issues on around the A6 that still are difficult, and that is, look, the end game for the A6 is difficult, and and as we know, for many of us who travel up the A6, it's that 40 mile per hour for such a length of the A6, and it is causing difficulty. And look, some of the diversionary, and look, that can't be helped. The diversion work, it does cause concern for road users. And look, I do take on board Councillor Ferguson's raising the issue about the junction between Drumahoe and Maydown. I think we really have to look to see about getting the A6 finished and get an end date on that. Probably the second one is and around, we're coming into winter once again, and we have the salting issue and around that. And look, it has been mentioned before, but I would just request just to look to ensure that the salt boxes and for especially in our rural areas and around there, that those salt boxes and piles are replenished as we come into winter. And as you quite rightly know, Robert, there are always issues when it comes near the winter. Probably the third one is once again gullies. It seems to be a topic that has been raised at nearly every meeting, Robert, you come into. And when David came in, and you're in now, Daniel, so it's one of these issues. And I think Councillor Hussey has raised an issue that I have raised continually and around. Yes, sometimes there are issues on around gullies being cleaned. Yes, we see them cleaned, but the lines are blocked. And that takes away from the work. And I'm told, look, it could be 3 months, it could be 6 months before anyone is back to clear the line. And sometimes the gully cleaners are back round again, and the line is still stuck. And I think that's causing a problem. And look, people mentioned it in urban areas. This is a problem as well in rural areas, and especially those quiet rural roads. And look, it's a safety issue as well, because look, it has an impact on flooding. The other thing that I have mentioned previously before is in around resourcing and equipment to deliver the service. And look, Robert, you have mentioned many times before and around the staffing issue, and it's no secret, so it isn't, and around that. But Robert, I just want to put on record my thanks to you and the team, and Daniel and the team, and around the recent flooding that we had there. And look, it was a very, very difficult issue. Look, we had a lot of flooding across the whole council area. But for myself as a rural councillor, and those rural roads that have been washed away completely, look, I know we were all called the time, we need it sorted, we need it sorted. But look, most of them are sorted now. And just to also mention, and around the adoption of roads, that does cause problems. So it does, especially in built-up areas where people have to carry or take their bin out to a certain place, and it's an ongoing issue. And we have a committee within council, and I think it should be meeting again, or should be about to meet again, and around that. And these are issues that are well documented. In relation to response. And I've just had a phone call today from one person about Gortnure Road, and look, there have been yellow markings on it for 6-7 months now, and it's got that stage now that the yellow markings are gone. And look, I do believe it needs to be looked at. And I also had a phone call from one of my council areas as well in the spirit is Ballymagorry, and I had met probably 6 months ago. Round that time, now it might be 5-6 months, maybe longer, but anyway, look, I walked around with a DFA officer and we looked at a number of issues. And to be honest, Robert, none of those issues have been resolved yet. None of them. And some of them were in around gully cleaning and signage and the general issues that you get in rural villages. And he just had that phone call just before the meeting. I think that's the street upgrade, the street lighting upgrade. Look, we all welcome that. There is no problem with welcoming the street upgrading, but the downfall is it. And look, every village that we go into or cul-de-sac that we go into, where these lights are being upgraded, and many of us, I would say nearly every councillor online here would say that there is one issue in regarding to the lighting of back alleyways, and they have been removed, and it is once again causing deep concern for our elderly community out there and people with disabilities, and we fought for years to get these lights in the back alleyways. But look, it's down to legislation at the end of the day. But still, that issue is very, very much being raised. But that's all my gripes. And thank you, Chair, and thank you to Daniel and Robert for coming in.
Thank you, Alderman Devaney. Councillor Stephen Edwards.
Chair, thank you very much, and I'm going to keep my comments as brief as I can, Chair. And also, yeah, welcome Robert and Daniel to the committee, and wishing Daniel well on your road. Daniel, I haven't met you personally, but I've definitely had a good few letters from you since you took up your post. But I'm going to raise a few issues, Chair, and I'm doing so in the context knowing that there is great uncertainty, especially around budgets and around different pressures hitting the department. So that's the context I'm raising. The first issue, Chair, as outlined in the report is the A5, and I know that sitting on the A5 N2 working group, and I know that there's future consultation on this issue, and there's not much we can do other than to try and support the scheme. But for me, Chair, in the last number of weeks, you're looking in the media and you're looking at Facebook, there seems to be an accident on the A5 nearly every day, Chair. Even today, there's another accident just outside Newton Stewart on the A5. It seems to be getting worse in my view, or maybe it's more people on the road since the pandemic. But the first issue, Chair, is there any plans to look at the safety of the current A5? I think it's absolutely atrocious. I know that Strabane Dioma is bad, and especially Oma de Ballygoy I think is really, really bad. There just seems to be a lot of accidents on that road. Chair, the second issue wanted to raise was around the Clary HGV, and I do welcome it, and I did work closely with the former minister to bring in those HGV restrictions in Clary. There is some concern. I was at a community association meeting recently in Clary, and there's some concern raised with me again that there are an increased number of HGVs using the road despite the ban being in place. And I know ultimately it is it's up to the PSNA to enforce the ban, but I'm wondering if DFI any plans to undertake a review of the effectiveness of the restrictions, or even the effectiveness of the signage, telling road users that there is a ban in place. Because when I look at the signage in the southern side of the border, they're a lot more prominent than what we have on the northern side. So I just wanted to raise that, Chair. Traffic cabin issues. I know that Spamount as well, and I do welcome it. It was on last year's report as well. Great to see getting an update on that. I know recently through correspondence with DFA as well that there's a planned scheme for the Cleater Road and Cavan Road and Castledare, but that's not included in today's paper. Chair, there's a few more issues. I'm going to be very brief. The Prospect Road, the Orchard Road, Bells Park Road junction there has been notorious. There's rumble strips down. I'm not too sure where we are in terms of the long-term scheme for that. The rumble strips are down. It's having a good impact, but there was plans for a larger scheme to demolish the bar and to put in a staggered junction there. I'd be grateful for an update on that. Chair, my penultimate issue is potholes. I've got some correspondence today actually that our council area has got 3,199 current potholes, which is double the next council area, which is Newry, Morning Down, and triple what Belfast has. And I just would like to ask what's been done to address this. And I get people contacting me about their cars being damaged and wanting to put claims in, and I know that claims budget is rising, but is there something that can be done there about that? Because we're paying out these fines for people damaging their cars rather than fixing potholes, in my view. Chair, my last point, and this is a parochial point, and I do drive these roads a lot. CMOs and Feeney have no 30-mile-an-hour speed signs and same on each entry point into both villages, and it's been like that for about 2 years, Chair. I just thought I would take the opportunity to raise that. I've raised say moles myself personally. Feeney's not my DA, but they don't have 30-mile-an-hour speed signs as you enter from each side of the village, at least on one side. Chair, there are my issues. Thank you for your time and for letting me on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Edwards. And members, I don't see anyone else, so I'm going to give raise a few issues myself here, and then I will let Daniel and Robert reply. Again, to be fair, most of the members have touched upon these, but I'll be very brief. Again, we sample issues raised before, but again, it's probably going to be cost, as Robert's going to say, but the piecemeal kind of tarring these back roads, and you get it from the residents on them. You tar 20 yards, you leave 20 yards, you tar 20 yards, you leave 20 yards. A prime example on Alderman Husshill Road was that Lismore Road coming into Kiln. It was like a patchwork quilt. But as I say, maybe that's just how it is. Rather, you'd thought it would have been handier to just have done the full road. The salt boxes. There was a lot of requests put in at a time, and I know I put in requests looking for salt boxes in areas. Never heard anything back from it, and I'm assuming they're just dead in the water now. You know, is there a length of time that you're meant to come back then and put in a follow-up, a request again for salt boxes? Again, another wee thing touching on to that, depending on how bad a winter we have, is there any capacity? I know it was raised with me, particularly from milkmen. You know, would there even be a way of buying grit from the like of yourselves? You know, there had been at the time, whenever we had those bad winters, there was several piles of grit left at the bridge in Castledearg, and people took them on that and gritted their own roads. You know, but again, you'll have particularly the dairymen on about that in regards to trying to get milk tankers into the yard. Is there a way even is there anything in that capacity whereby individual farmers could deal with the EFI to buy bits and pieces like that? I know it happens on the day when the weather comes, you know, but it's just to try to relay that further down the line. Your public liability claims, I see the figures there and the damage and all the rest. Anything in particular in that, or is that predominantly just, you know, cars damaged in potholes, or is there anything in particular that you want to relay in that? You know, is that the majority of these here, or what? Is there anything you want to come out with that one? Again, I will push upon the 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. You know, nothing against the schools that are raised there, but I mean, I see the wee school up in Crana has the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit at it, you know, and my view, that road would be a lot quieter than that main road up there through St Eugene's and Victoria Bridge and Castledearg High School and Kiln Primary School. You know, but again, I'm just questioning that one then. Is that within your own remit? I know it had been mentioned it was Minister Mallon, the DFI, who was making the decision as to where those were. Is that anything that you can decide locally, or is that something you have to wait for someone higher up the line to make the call on that one? In regards, and I'm not looking for a touch here, I just happened to be a lady driving, and I happened to be coming behind her down the road, and Councillor Edwards has touched upon it, the Bells Park Road, Prospect Bar, and when I was coming down the Orchard Road, coming from Tullyhusker, and you have the speed ramps there, or the rumble bars, and it was a lady because she then turned left and headed for Claddy, so I could see who it was. But she nicely drove on the wrong side of the road to avoid the rumble bars. Drove to the wrong side of the road to the junction and then turned left. So I mean, anybody had been coming up from the Glebe or going that way would have been head on into her. So I mean, where I'm coming from is outside Etherney. Whenever you're heading for Maynoo, or heading for Maynoo instead of heading towards Kesh, you do have a section there whereby it's whereby the full road has the rumble bar, and I'm just wondering, is there any reason why the full road didn't have the rumble bar there? Why it was just half of it? Again, we have touched speed ramps. Just a wee question on speed ramps. Is there a policy of freshen them up? You know, there's a lot of them have been all the red markings are off them there, and they're harder to see. And I know there are signs there with the speed ramps, but I'm just wondering in that regard, is there a wee policy in that being, is that sort of along with the road markings? street lighting, I was just going to ask a wee question there. I know in the like of on the main roads, you're putting on the large or the white light, the brighter white light there. And I'm assuming in most of the housing estates, if you want to put it in that regard, that's again, it's a white light, but it's a smaller bulb or it's a smaller capacity light. I'm just wondering, is there any room for potentially, it was raised in regards to maybe some areas that aren't on the main road, but they may well have a bit of antisocial behaviour, that maybe the brighter light might help or not? Maybe that's not within your remit, or you're just doing it as the policy is. One there in regards to, I don't see it in the paper, but maybe I've missed it. How short staff are you now? I mean, I know I have spoke with that. I mean, you've touched on staffing issues there, but how low are we now? I mean, I know I'd had site meetings with individuals from DFI out in the roads, and they had mentioned, at a stage maybe having 6 individuals under them who would have went out and found road defects and reported them, and they were maybe down to 2 or 3. So I'm just wondering, how bad is it? Because I know you are doing a lot of work, and I know we're raising all the issues, but it's just how with what manpower would you have on the ground now? The other couple of very brief ones then, again, we're touching on too, the fleet of machinery and that you have. Is it, I know we would have an issue, and it's touched on, as the gullies. And I know I'd spoke to individuals at the time, and they were said there was a machine was brought up to the Castlereagh area, and it was doing a wee bit up here, but it was needed back within the city because there was maybe only one machine that was still functioning, and another machine was laid down, and therefore you were kind of using one machine for the council area. So again, how poor or is the fleet in a good state of repair, or is that more pressure put on with costs? And the last one I see there is that I have wrote down there is the number of road signs there, but again, I suppose it's just getting round to it. There was a number of road signs, I suppose, would have been damaged with what I see as strong winds that were over the winter time, and I do see a lot of them marked. There might be a road sign warning of a sharp bend or of a hidden dip or whatever it happens to be, and where the wind has blew them and damaged them, broke a clip, the sign has fell off, or the road sign has been damaged a bit and blew over a bit, or give way signs and that, and I see them marked with the yellow spray. But they've been like that now 6 months or more. And I'm just wondering, is that just they'll get round to at some stage, or is it just a thing, just keep refreshing the report on it? So that seems to be the most of my own wee queries there. So I'll leave it with you now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I'll same as before, I'll go through them, and hopefully Robert will mop up any issues that I miss, or if he has information that would add to the answer. The A6, totally appreciate that everybody wants to see that particular job come to a happy conclusion, because it'll make a huge difference to people travelling from Derry towards Belfast. Massive. As I mentioned earlier, that's our colleagues in SRI in Northern Division, and I'm more than happy to speak to them with regards to clarifying an end date. What I do know is that the A6 website that's updated on a regular basis is actually a very good place to get information such as things as the traffic, temporary traffic restrictions or diversions, or whether they've been put back to another weekend, and I find that's a very useful source of information there. But as I said before, I'm more than happy to go back to SRI in Northern Division and try and pin them down on a completion date. But I suspect with the uncertainties around weather and laying material and completing those sorts of weather dependent works, that they'll may give a range rather than a concrete date. I'll certainly come back to you on that. Salting and salt boxes. I do know that Western Division as a whole has vastly more salt boxes, and probably rightly so, considering the topography and the number of roads that we have, than a number of the other divisions. And I think we've applied the policy for the provision of salt boxes in the past pretty well, and I think we've been you know, positively trying to help anybody who's requested them previously. But it does cost a significant number of money to go out and replenish those salt boxes if we have a particularly bad winter. But all salt boxes should be down, and if they've been there before, and full prior to the start of the winter gritting season. What I would say is, because there's such a large number, we will be carrying out a review as part of our normal business with regards to the number, just to make sure that they all comply with the policy that we have for salt boxes. For example, there shouldn't be 2 boxes within 150 meters of each other. So things like that may reduce the number of salt boxes if we've been over enthusiastic in our provision of them. Gullies cleaned and lines blocked. I take the point that if the gully's cleaned and the line is unable to be cleared by the gully cleaner, that quite possibly there may be a delay before we have resource available to complete the pipeline. But that should be, once we identify an area that has a block pipe, it should be on our schedule for us to address if and when resources permit. And I would suggest if we haven't, then either our resources didn't allow us to get to it during that particular time, or I would suggest if you recognise there is an issue, then to put it on our online reporting system again, or contact the section office regarding it. The adoption of roads, this is recognised, I think, by across all divisions, that the adoption of roads has perhaps not been as swift as we would have liked, or as swift as it would have been in the past when we had a full complement of staff. And this goes to the point that you made yourself, Chair, with regards to what is our current staffing complement. Our current staffing complement was devised after the voluntary exit scheme to deliver. It was structured to deliver between 70 and 80 million pounds of work per year across Northern Ireland with regards to resurfacing and the like. Unfortunately, we've never actually had that staff structure due to staff. The posts were there, but we didn't have staff in them. We're currently in Western Division, and Robert alluded to it earlier, running with an overall staff deficit of about 18%. So if you pro rata that, if our staff structure was supposed to achieve 80 million pounds per year, then we currently are staffed, people in post, to deliver about 65, and yet we're still delivering 70, 80, up to 100 million pounds per year since that VS came through. So, I agree completely that we definitely need to fill those absent posts, and I believe that there is a process being put together by senior management to address those issues, and it's something they're very cognizant of, and the fact that we've perhaps not filled them as quickly as we should have in the past. Specifically for the adoption of the roads, those staff not being available, staff were available, but they were tasked with other priority jobs. So there has been a backlog, I believe, increasing of non-adopted roads or enforcement required on them. And I'm chair of the Network Planning Committee, which looks at private streets and network planning issues. And believe me, since I moved into post 5 months ago, that has been very high on our agenda, and we are looking at. I'm not going to give you an awful lot of details at the moment, mainly because we're negotiating through the process to use an external provider to follow up on adoptions. But obviously there's procurement issues and how we bring them on board, and it's something that's been done in other parts of the UK, and it's something that we're looking at to address that issue. It was Councillor Devaney mentioned road markings. I think, as I mentioned earlier, if there's any road markings that are causing a safety issue, then please either report it to my colleagues in the section office or put it on our online reporting system, because, as you rightly mentioned, these sorts of things have the potential to cause accidents, and we do have a budget to refresh and renew road markings. And as Robert may correct me here, but I believe there's still budget available to carry on refreshing as many road markings as we can during the year. Street lighting, yes. The street lighting issues with regards to back alleyways, you're absolutely right. When you mentioned, Councillor Devaney, that our policy doesn't allow us to light unadopted back alleys. They may have been, those streetlights may have been provided in the past under a different policy. But at the minute, you're quite right that if the lighting systems in the back alleys are potentially unsafe or coming towards the end of their life during a renewal program, they will be removed. And I completely sympathise with the residents and the older people who may feel slightly more unsafe and have to use a different route because those back alleyways are perhaps no longer lit. And as you quite rightly mentioned, to allow us to address this comprehensively, a change in policy would be required. But at the minute, I don't think there's as much as we'd like to assist. I think we're constrained by the policy as it stands. Councillor Edwards, A5, yeah, the A5 you quite rightly mentioned is a real health and safety black spot, to use the old terminology. There does seem to be an awful lot of accidents on that, and it's something I've noticed since taking up my post in OMA here. I use the A5 on a regular basis, and the volume and speed of traffic on it is it's frightening at times. Like, I'm no shrinking violet, and I drive at the speed limit, but quite often I get overtaken by people going ridiculous speeds. And I think it's well established that our current minister is a huge, he's a huge advocate for the A5. And I think it's the replacement A5, but I think there is an obligation on us, and I think it's well recognised by my staff, that any interventions that we can come up with to improve safety, particularly at areas where there is an accident history, we will certainly endeavour to carry out works. One of the areas that springs to my mind is Glenavy there, where there was unfortunately a fatality, multiple fatalities over the last number of years, where we've implemented additional traffic control measures such as the red surfacing, the rumple strips, the gateway signage, and at the minute we're looking at a potential street lighting project through there to highlight and to reduce the potential for future accidents at that point. So I think if there are areas where you have particular concerns and you would like us to look at, I would be happy to take take note of those locations and ask my network development team to review them. The HVGV restrictions in Claudy, as you quite rightly mentioned, it's obviously an enforcement issue there, but I'm more than happy to take or ask my network development team, traffic team, to look at the signage there to make sure that it's appropriate. And if there are additional measures that need or that could be put in, then they'll certainly identify them. So I'll get back to you on that one. Orchard Road, Bells Park Road. Yeah, looking for an update on that. The land negotiations are ongoing with one of the critical properties there that'll help improve the sightlines and allow the first stage of the safety improvement scheme down there. I believe they're moving towards a conclusion, but we're not there yet. So the intention this year is to hopefully later this year, once those negotiations are complete and the department has the land it requires, is for us to carry out the first phase, which is to vastly improve the sightlines down there. And then because there's additional land required for the staggering of that junction, then that will be taken forward at a later date. But you're quite right. It is a historically poor accident history there, so it is a priority scheme for us. And once we get through this particular first phase, we'll be hoping to move into the second phase in the subsequent year once further land negotiations have been completed. You make the point about the vast number of potholes there, the 3,199. I can't confirm that number. I don't have those details to hand, but what I can confirm is that our limited service policy allows us to repair any potholes over 50 millimeters on all roads and any potholes over 20 millimeters on trunk roads or high vehicle roads. So I appreciate that, and we would prefer to be able to address more potholes, but unfortunately our budget does not allow that at the moment. So a number of those potholes that you refer to may not meet the criteria for intervention yet. So these would be potholes on roads that are on lesser traffic roads that would be between 0 and 50 millimeters deep. So unfortunately, while they are a concern and they do qualify as a pothole, at the minute our policy doesn't allow us, or we don't have the money of the budget to address them until they reach a certain depth. The 30-mile-per-hour speed limits, that's one that I'll have to get back to you on, that I'll have my network development team have a look at, and if they're missing, then obviously they need to be replaced. Chair, you mentioned that there was areas or roads that had piecemeal tarring, especially on back roads. I think part of the issue there was when we didn't have a asphalt contract, we were carrying out quite a lot of repairs using spreader machines, using our small scale contract. And there are limits on the value of work that we can carry out with those small scale contracts. So to spend out our allocation, what we would have done is we would have done multiple small scale resurfacing schemes, similar to what you mentioned. And that gave us an opportunity to repair those roads as best we could without our asphalt resurfacing contract. So that's probably why there may have been a proliferation over the last year of those types of repairs. I mentioned the salt boxes a little earlier. I mean, if we get a request, we'll certainly consider it in line with the policy that we currently operate. There may, it's a good question. The next one was regards whether individuals could buy the grit from DFI, and that's maybe something, Robert, you may have come across in the past, and you might be able to help me out with.
The short answer, members, is no. We're not geared up to sell grit. If you can think about the practicalities of doing it, somebody turns up at a depot, wants a load of grit. Well, how do you measure it? How do you determine what you should charge them? How do you invoice them, et cetera, et cetera? It just is something that we are not resourced to take on board. There's also the issues over health and safety and having people, potentially wandering around our depots where there's heavy machinery moving, and the risk that could potentially pose. But I am reliably informed that quite a lot of agricultural merchants and builders merchants stock salt and grit in bag form. And I would suggest that if any of your constituents raise a query like this, then they're directed to those sources.
Okay. Thanks, Robert. The breakdown of the public liability claims was the next thing that was mentioned. I don't have those breakdowns to hand, but if you'd like me to pursue that, I can certainly look into it and get back to you if you indicate that you'd like us to do so. The 20 mile per hour, how the criteria works, not being in post when the previous criteria was put together. I suppose I only have the policy that we have with regards to the criteria for the provision and the prioritization of the 20 mile per hour at schools. So as part of I'll certainly be involved or more involved in the review of the criteria and the effectiveness of the 25 mile per hour at schools. And hopefully the schools that you mentioned will appear, certainly they sound very worthy of the installation of those 20 mile per hour zones. But I suppose we're constrained by the criteria as it stands. And as I say, that the review will perhaps reprioritize some schools and see those ones that you mentioned move higher up the priority list. But until that is completed, I'm afraid I don't have a clear answer of when they'll achieve their, the installation of the 20 mile per hour signs. Bells Park Road, Prospect Road, again, the rumple strip. I suppose the rumple strip was installed there to warn of an impending, to warn of the junction coming up. I suppose with somebody moving away from the junction, it was thought that the rumple strip would not be necessary on the exit lane from the junction. But if people are carrying out, quite frankly, a dangerous maneuver similar to what you're saying, then and it's happening on a regular basis, then it's something that we would review. Certainly, I can ask my network development staff to have a word with the PSNI to see if they've observed anything like this, and if they have, and if it is a regular basis, then we'd certainly consider pushing the rumple strip across the entire road. The LED lights, I'd have to go to my street lighting colleagues with regards to the possibility of providing brighter lights within estates. The distribution of light and the distribution of lighting columns is dictated by the policy in certain areas. So, and the brightness of the light is dictated by the volume of traffic generally. So I'd need to get back to you with regards to the provision of brighter lights in those areas and whether they can be requested. The labour issue I mentioned a bit earlier, Western Division are currently carrying about 17-18% of staff vacancies. The fleet machinery with regards to gully cleaning, our operations and maintenance resource has reduced over the last number of years, and we're relying more often on external contractors to carry out our gully cleaning operations. And they're usually fairly well resourced and keep their equipment up to date. I suppose that's all I can really say on that one. And the road signs, if they're damaged, certainly if there's a safety issue with regards to, junction ahead, yield, stop signs, and that sort of thing, that's a real safety issue that we should be addressing as quickly as resources allow. So if there are issues like that, I would urge councillors to report it to the section office staff, or again onto the online reporting facility, because yeah, that's a very real safety issue that we should be addressing. Robert, is there anything there that you want to add to any of those that would help clarify our position?
Yes, if I could just address Alderman Devaney. He mentioned a site meeting in Balmagorry and the issues that were looked at back then, still not been addressed. If I could request, if you could maybe drop me an email what those issues are, I'll follow them up and get back to him. Other issues, yeah, the 30-mile-an-hour signs in Cyan Mills, you alluded to that. Can I just point out that Feeney is not in Western Division, it's in Northern, but we'll pass on that request for the 30-mile-an-hour sign to be reinstated to Northern. Can I maybe just give some clarity on what resource we have available for gully cleaning? We source our gully cleaning from two sources. One is from our external environmental maintenance contractor, and one is from our own internal operation and maintenance contractor. We task our external contractor to do the regular routine cleaning, and he has one gully emptier in Derry and one in Strabane, covering both the Strabane, Castleberg, Newton Stewart and rural area. However, as a result of the pandemic, they were impacted to some degree by manpower issues, which they are gradually improving. So there was problems with service delivery with the contractor because of that issue. Regarding our own internal contractor, there is one gully emptier that is shared between our depot in Derry and the Mavati, and one in Strabane, which is shared with Oma. The real issue really isn't that the availability of the fleet. The real issue is the availability of the manpower to operate the fleet. You have to be especially trained to use it. And with our continuing downward pressures on our labour, operators have become quite scarce, and plans are afoot to address that issue, but it may take some time to implement that. So if you can appreciate that, if somebody is out cleaning gullies, it means they're not fixing potholes, they're not fixing curbs, etc., etc. So it's a balancing act. I think that's all I can allude to at this stage. It might help to clarify some issues.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated for your time and for answering all the questions that have been given to you. And hopefully they'll be able to follow up as well with tidy up some of these issues. I'm just going to bring Karen in here to on behalf of the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And just really, I suppose, on behalf of the officers, to welcome Daniel to Western Division. I know he's been in post now 5 months, and I think had somewhat a baptism of fire with a number of various issues that he's been working on with ourselves and other partners. And I suppose really just thanks to the wider team, you know, Robert, Harry, Declan, Darren, Gordon and Lorraine and Michelle. Our team work with all of them members, as you will probably be aware, on probably a daily basis rather than weekly, you know, across various projects that we're working together on, maintenance issues, regeneration, planning issues, and then some of our strategic projects, City Deal, etc., and some of the major regen projects. And I think, you know, they're a very, very key partner to council, and again, we always work well with them in terms of a partnership approach and trying to find solutions to the problems that we face. So really just to thank them, and we look forward to working with them in the year ahead. Thank you, Chair.
Members, I think that brings our meeting to a close. I don't see that there's anything else to raise. Thank you for your attendance, and thanks in particular to Daniel and to Robert for your input. And members, good evening. Let's just go with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.